Okay, so far we have learned several ways of solving quadratics, and we're just adding on to our tool belt, or all the things that we can possibly use by using the quadratic formula. So, for example, what we are trying to do is that if you end up with or have a problem like that, there is going to be one method that's going to be easier or a better choice than others. Okay? So on this one, it's already written as a perfect square, so I would solve this by using square roots. And square root cancel each other out. Gives you, oopsie, x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 8. Subtract 4 on both sides and get x to equal negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 8. And then you put it in your calculator and get your values of negative 1.17 and negative 6.83. Okay? Well, sometimes they're not already set up this way. So we have something like x squared minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. So far we have learned to solve these by completing the square. So we would subtract 8 on both sides, take b, divide it by 2, and then square it, yada yada, okay, completing the square. There is also another method called the quadratic formula. You will learn the quadratic formula, you will know it, you'll be able to sing it, etc. When using the quadratic formula, you need to still be able to identify your a, your b, and your c. Before you identify your a, b, and your c, this has to be equal to 0. So if it's not equal to 0, you need to get it in that format. In this one, a is 1, because it's in front of the quadratic. B is negative 6, and c would be a positive 8. Quadratic formula, please do not freak out on me. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? This, a little piece of paper in here so far. This should look familiar. Negative b all over 2a. We used that at the very beginning when we were trying to find our h, or in other words, the x coordinate of our vertex. So that's where that comes from. Okay, so I'm going to use this formula. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times my a. The first thing I do is I always just plug in the values. I don't try to do any math. So x equals the opposite of negative 6 is a positive 6 plus or minus the square root. This is where people screw up. The negative 6 squared. What is any number squared? It's a positive. I would get in the habit of taking all of this and putting that in your calculator all at once. So negative 4 times 1 times 8 does give you a negative 32 all over 2. So you have 6 plus or minus square root of 4 over 2. And you guys have seen this before. This is where I'd plug it in my calculator. This actually isn't even a calculator problem. X equals 6 plus or minus 2 over 2. And then I can split it up. 6 plus 2 divided by 2 and 6 minus 2 divided by 2 gives me 8 divided by 2 gives me 4, and 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. So those are my solutions. When these do not come out to be bizarre decimals, that tells me that if I would factor it, it would come out nice and neat. If I were to complete the square, it would come out nice and neat. Okay, so it's just another way of solving. Let's do another one of those that does not come out. So neat. So we have x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 6. So before you identify a, b, and c, get everything equal to 0. So I'm going to have to subtract 6 on both sides. Now I can identify a, b, and c. Take a minute, pause if you need to, and do this part on your own. A is 1, B is -3, and C is a -5. X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Fill in what I have. Opposite of B, which is -3, plus or minus the square root of -3 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. I know in the last example we also had an A of 1. That's not always going to be true. Still doesn't matter. It's going to be the same formula. Opposite of -3 is 3. -3 squared is 9. I'm going to take all of this at once, and I know that a negative times a positive times a negative is going to give me a positive 20 all over 2. 3 plus or minus the square root of 29 over 2. And again, this should look very familiar. This is where you split it up. 3 plus the square root of 29 divided by 2, and 3 minus the square root of 29 divided by 2. Plug those into your calculator, and you are going to get 4.19 and -1.19. Okay, and so again, quadratic formula. We'll work on this in class, and you will know how to sing it.